Hi everybody, Rainbow Martin here. I just want to call in here with a quick update.
For years, Rain Brown, the youngest member of the Brown family from Alaskan bush people, has held a special place in viewers' hearts. With her bright smile, creative spirit, and the role of being the family's baby, Rain seemed to bring warmth and light even amid the harshest wilderness. But behind that cheerful image, fans often wondered if something heavier was weighing on her. Online, rumors spread, whispers of depression, grief, and the emotional toll of growing up on reality TV. For years, Rain stayed silent, leaving questions unanswered. Now, however, she has finally spoken out, confirming what many suspected. She has struggled, and her journey has been deeply personal. This revelation has both stunned and inspired fans, showing the courage it takes to share one's truth. Today, we dive into Rain Brown's story of hardship, healing, and finding the strength to finally speak. Growing up, Brown. What was it truly like to grow up in the untouched wilds of Alaska, with cameras documenting nearly every moment of your life? For Rain Brown, the youngest member of the Brown family, childhood was anything but ordinary. While most kids her age were sitting in classrooms, riding bikes around neighborhoods, and celebrating birthdays with friends, Rain's world was filled with endless forests, frozen rivers, and a family determined to survive far away from modern society. Can you imagine a life where survival meant more than video games, and chopping wood wasn't a novelty, but a daily routine? From the very start, Rain was introduced to an extraordinary lifestyle. She was born into a family that had already chosen a path of rugged independence. Her brothers and sisters were already seasoned in the wilderness way of life. For Rain, however, growing up in that untamed world came with both beauty and burden. Did she always feel like she belonged among the trees and silence of Alaska? Or were there quiet nights when she dreamed of a different kind of childhood? One with friends, classrooms, and city lights. Even as a little girl, Rain's individuality shone through. She was imaginative, thoughtful, and full of wonder. While her siblings focused on hunting, fishing, and building shelters, Rain often turned to art and writing, finding comfort in creativity. Maybe this was her way of softening the harshness of wilderness living, a gentle balance between strength and sensitivity. Fans quickly saw that difference. They admired her for staying true to herself, even when everything around her demanded toughness. But being in front of the cameras wasn't easy. It gave Rain a platform to share her light with the world, but it also brought pressure no child could fully prepare for. How does someone so young learn to live under a spotlight? Every smile, every tear, every emotion, seen, analyzed, and judged by strangers across the globe. How does a young girl find herself when the world already thinks it knows who she is? As the youngest of the family, Rain carried a label, the baby. It sounded sweet, but it came with expectations. Audiences wanted her to stay cheerful, innocent, and full of hope forever. But time changes everyone. What happens when the baby grows up and starts facing pain, loss, and questions about her place in the world? Could she truly grow into her own identity, or was she trapped by the image that fame had built around her? Growing up, Brown was a journey filled with contrasts. Rain was surrounded by deep family love and loyalty, yet also by loneliness and the constant eyes of fame. Nature taught her to be strong, but life taught her even tougher lessons. In the midst of wilderness and fame, her resilience began to take shape. But was that resilience strong enough to protect her from the emotional storms that were waiting just beyond the trees? Spotlight and expectations. What happens when a quiet life in the Alaskan wilderness suddenly collides with the glare of worldwide fame? For Rain Brown, the youngest of the Brown family, that shift from private simplicity to televised reality was nothing short of life-changing. She had always been the cherished little sister, protected within the wooden walls of her family's remote cabin. But once the cameras started rolling, everything shifted. Could she have truly grasped what it meant when producers told them that millions of people would soon be watching their every move? The spotlight can be a beautiful gift and a heavy burden. It brought recognition, comfort, and the chance to show the world the Browns' extraordinary way of life. Yet it also built invisible walls around them, where every smile, every stumble, every word became a public discussion. How does a young girl find peace when her every emotion becomes part of a show? Was Rain ever ready to exchange her quiet anonymity for the endless eyes of fame? As the series grew more popular, the weight of comparison crept in. Her older siblings had their own clear roles: the hunter, the builder, the caretaker, the leader. Each had a purpose, a defined place in the family's wilderness story. But where did Rain fit in? Was she meant to remain the baby, the one always sheltered and smiling? Or would she be pushed into a part she never wanted to play? These questions followed her as she grew up, while the world around her tried to decide who she should be before she even knew herself. Fans loved her sweetness, her humor, her spark of creativity. Yet, is it fair to expect a child to stay frozen in time just to keep the audience happy? Kids grow, they change, they question the world around them. But to many viewers, Rain was still that cheerful little girl with the bright grin and open heart. What happens when that smile fades, even for a moment? Does the world allow her to feel pain, or does it turn that pain into gossip? Outside the show, another spotlight burned: social media. It became a second stage, far harsher than the first. Every photo, every caption, every glance was judged and dissected. Comments about her looks, her choices, and her emotions filled her feeds. Could any teenager stand under that kind of scrutiny without feeling broken at times? Did she ever wish she could escape it all, return to the mountains and rivers, where no one was watching, no one was judging? Still, Rain faced it with quiet courage. She continued to express herself through her words, her art, and her honesty. But deep down, a question lingered. Was she living for herself, or for everyone else's expectations? The fame that once celebrated her family's story also cast long shadows over her own. And somewhere within those shadows, the beginnings of her greatest struggles started to take root, waiting for the day she'd finally find her voice and tell her truth. The rumors begin. When does simple curiosity cross the line into speculation? And when does speculation become rumor? For Rain Brown, that line was crossed again and again. As the youngest face of Alaskan bush people, her life was never truly her own. Each episode revealed glimpses of her world, yet fans and critics always wanted more. They wanted to know what happened once the cameras stopped rolling, what emotions hid behind her smile, and whether the challenges of wilderness life had left invisible scars. But was this curiosity born of concern, or an invasion into a young woman's fragile reality? The whispers began quietly. Viewers noticed moments when Rain seemed distant or lost in thought. Was it just tiredness from long filming days, or something heavier weighing on her heart? Some pointed to her emotional interviews, others to her absence from certain family moments. Were these natural growing pains, or hints of a deeper struggle that no one could see? Slowly, questions turned into conclusions, drawn not from truth, but from fragments pieced together by outsiders. Then the whispers became louder. Social media carried them like wildfire, spreading from one comment section to another. Rumors about depression, grief, and emotional exhaustion filled online threads. Some spoke with compassion, others with cruelty. But how does a teenager endure the world's collective judgment before she's even learned who she is? Could anyone, let alone the youngest in a family already under immense scrutiny, survive such emotional invasion? Soon, the gossip expanded beyond emotions. People speculated about her identity, her place within the family, even her appearance. Was she changing too fast? Was she rebelling? Every post, every picture became fuel for more assumptions. Through it all, Rain stayed silent. But what did that silence mean? Was it her way of protecting her heart? Or did people mistake her quiet for confession? And then came tragedy, the loss of her father. Viewers saw grief written across her face in the episodes that followed. Could her sadness be explained simply by mourning? Or was it part of a much deeper inner storm? Few paused to consider the humanity behind the scenes. A daughter grieving while the cameras kept turning. How can someone mourn privately when the world demands strength as a performance? For Rain, the rumors were a double-edged sword. They proved that people cared, but they also robbed her of the space she needed to heal. Every sigh, every absence, every emotion became evidence for strangers' theories. How do you heal when every wound is public property? Could she ever be vulnerable without being misjudged? The whispers that began as curiosity soon thundered into chaos. And as the world continued to speculate, Rain faced a crossroads that would change her forever. Would she stay silent and let others define her story? Or would she rise above the noise and finally share her truth? Rain speaks out. How long can someone stay silent when the world keeps whispering about their pain? For Rain Brown, the moment came when the weight of those rumors grew too heavy to bear. Fans had seen her bright smile dim, her presence waver, her emotions surface in quiet, heartbreaking ways. After years of speculation, Rain decided to speak, to finally tell her own story. What gave her that courage? Was it exhaustion from hiding, or a realization that her honesty might help others walking through their own silent storms? Rain revealed that she had been struggling with inner battles for years. She spoke openly about depression, isolation, and the deep grief that followed her father's death. Could the world ever understand what it feels like to lose a parent, while millions of strangers analyze your every tear? Her words weren't polished or rehearsed. They were raw, real, and utterly human. Why does honesty surprise us when it's the most natural thing in the world? Fame, grief, and family pressure had collided in her life like a storm. As the youngest child, she was always expected to shine, to stay cheerful and optimistic no matter what. But behind that expectation was exhaustion. Who could keep smiling when their heart felt broken? Who could pretend strength when all they wanted was to fall apart? Her confession didn't just confirm what people suspected. It transformed the narrative entirely. What had once been gossip now became testimony. By sharing her truth, Rain reclaimed her identity. She wasn't the quiet, fragile girl people had imagined. She was strong, self-aware, and unafraid to be vulnerable. And isn't that the very strength that made people love her from the beginning? Rain also revealed how she channeled her pain into art. Writing, painting, and creativity became her way of healing. She encouraged others to do the same, reminding fans that struggle doesn't make you weak, it makes you real. Perhaps her most powerful gift wasn't the smile she showed on TV, but the honesty she shared off-screen. Could her openness become a guiding light for those battling their own hidden pain? By speaking out, Rain turned whispers into words and words into strength. She reminded the world that being on television doesn't shield anyone from heartbreak. It can amplify it. Her truth reached beyond the show, touching hearts of people who had never even watched Alaskan bush people. When one person's story can inspire thousands, maybe that's proof that honesty is stronger than fame, and vulnerability more heroic than any scripted strength. In breaking her silence, Rain didn't just tell her story. She began a new one written with courage, truth, and hope. The weight of loss. What happens when the bedrock of a family suddenly disappears? For Rain Brown, losing her father, Billy, was far more than a personal heartbreak. It was like the compass of her life had vanished. the guiding presence that had anchored the Browns through the wilderness and every challenge along the way. Can anyone ever truly prepare for the moment when the person they lean on most is gone? And how does a young woman carry such grief when millions are watching her every move? Rain had always been especially close to her father. He was her mentor, her rock, and the voice she turned to in moments of doubt. Losing him during such a formative time in her life felt like more than losing a parent. It was losing the very framework that had shaped her identity, her dreams, and her responsibilities, both to her family and to the fans who followed the Browns' story. The cameras never stopped rolling, even as the family struggled with unimaginable sorrow. Was it fair to witness grief under such public scrutiny? Rain had to find a way to mourn privately while performing publicly. She shed tears in quiet moments, yet smiled for the sake of her family and audience alike. Can sorrow ever be fully expressed when it's filtered through the lens of constant observation? Or does the world force one to hide the heaviest parts of the heart? Billy's passing also marked a turning point for the Browns as a family. He had been the patriarch, the visionary, the glue that held them together in their rugged life. Without him, Rain and her siblings faced a reality that demanded resilience, courage, and unity. How does a family continue when its leader is gone? For Rain, the question carried extra weight. She was the youngest, still finding herself in a complex family dynamic. The grief pressed on her in unexpected ways. Quiet nights felt endless, and the absence of her father's voice echoed in the silence. She admitted to feeling broken at times, as though the joy she once held had been stolen. Yet within this sorrow, she began searching for meaning. Could this loss be an ending, or the beginning of discovering new inner strength? Through interviews and reflections, Rain showed raw honesty about her grief. She did not sugarcoat it, nor did she hide from the reality of her pain. In doing so, she turned her vulnerability into a lesson for others. Her story became a testament. Loss is not something to be hidden, but something to experience fully, embrace, and learn from. In the end, the weight of loss did not crush Rain. It shaped her, molding her into a young woman with depth, empathy, and remarkable resilience. A young woman finding her voice. After the storm of loss, how does someone rebuild? For Rain Brown, the answer was not immediate, but gradually she began to chart her own course. No longer just the youngest child in her father's shadow, she started exploring her identity, her voice, and her place in a world that had already defined her for her. But how do you find yourself when the world is speaking loudly about who it thinks you are? Rain turned inward, seeking solace in creativity. She wrote, sketched, and poured her feelings onto paper, creating spaces where she could explore her emotions safely. Could art and journaling become more than hobbies? Could they be the bridge from pain to healing? Sharing glimpses of this side of herself revealed her strength, not weakness. How many young adults dare to expose such vulnerability in front of a global audience? She also began speaking more openly about her struggles, no longer allowing rumors to shape her story. Through social media, interviews, and heartfelt posts, Rain presented a fuller, honest version of herself. Why does such honesty resonate? Perhaps because it defies the perfection often portrayed in media. Rain's authenticity, raw and sometimes uncomfortable, became a model for others to embrace their truth. Finding her voice also meant setting boundaries. Fame had thrust her into the spotlight, but she learned that strength sometimes looks like choosing what to protect. She decided what to share and what to keep private, balancing transparency with self-preservation. This careful approach allowed her to step into adulthood without losing herself to the pressures of constant exposure. Her family noticed the change. No longer just the baby of the Browns, Rain began offering wisdom and perspective to her siblings. Could it be that the struggles she endured became a source of strength? not just for her, but for those around her. What once seemed like vulnerability transformed into resilience. As her voice strengthened, so did her message. Struggle does not equal failure, and acknowledging pain is not surrender. On the contrary, it is the first step toward growth and renewal. Rain Brown's journey had evolved. She was no longer just a girl in the wilderness. She was a young woman finding her voice, showing the world that courage is born from honesty, and that resilience can shine even in the darkest moments. Family bonds and struggles. What does it mean to grow up in a family that is constantly in the public eye? For Rain Brown, her siblings were more than just brothers and sisters. They were co-stars, companions, and at times, even critics. The Brown family was admired for their unity, but beneath that unity were struggles that only insiders could truly understand. Can a family remain close when private disagreements are displayed on screens for millions? Or does the glare of fame magnify ordinary tensions into seemingly insurmountable challenges? Rain often described her siblings as her strongest support. They were by her side through her father's passing, through life away from the cameras, and during the moments she admitted her struggles. Yet even in this closeness, conflicts arose. What family does not experience arguments or misunderstandings? But when disagreements are captured on camera, don't they seem bigger, heavier, and more permanent than they actually are? Being the youngest carried its own pressures. Rain was deeply loved, yet she sometimes felt stifled by protection. Were her siblings shielding her out of care, or were they unintentionally preventing her from stepping fully into her own life? She was expected to remain cheerful, to bring light to heavy situations, but who was noticing when her own heart grew heavy? Could the title of baby of the family be both a comfort and a limitation? Even so, her bond with her siblings was a lifeline during her darkest moments. When she revealed her struggles, they did not turn away. Instead, they held her close, proving that family is not only about surviving the wilderness, but also about enduring emotional storms together. How many people can say they have siblings who refuse to let them fall completely, no matter the weight pressing down? Yet the struggles were real. Life without Billy required everyone to adapt. Some siblings stepped into new roles, taking on responsibilities they had never held before. Rain had to navigate her grief while understanding her own place in this shifting dynamic. Did she ever feel overlooked? Or did the shared sorrow ultimately bring them closer? The answers were never simple, but her love and loyalty to her family never wavered. For the Browns, family bonds were tested most in times of sorrow. The wilderness was challenging, yes, but grief, loss, and constant public scrutiny were even heavier. Rain's story was not one of perfection, but of persistence. Perhaps the beauty of the Brown family lies not in flawless unity, but in their willingness to remain real, raw, and steadfast, even when the weight feels almost unbearable. Turning point. When does pain transform into strength? The turning point came quietly, a moment when sorrow could no longer dominate her story. Years of grief, rumors, and expectations had shaped her life, but within her, a quiet determination was growing. Could the hardships she had endured be preparing her to rise stronger than ever? Was it possible that the struggles she longed to avoid were instead forging resilience? Rain began to understand that healing takes time. She made choices that reflected a desire to move forward instead of remaining trapped in grief. She pursued therapy, leaned on her faith, and discovered healthy coping strategies. Could asking for help be the very sign of strength? Might this be the moment when the chains of despair start to break? Her transformation did not arrive in a single dramatic event, but through small, intentional steps. She began speaking more openly with fans, not only about struggles, but also about growth. By sharing her journey, Rain offered hope to others. that their own pain could also be temporary, and that healing is possible. Sometimes the most powerful turning points are quiet, steady, and intentional. Her family remained a source of support, yet Rain realized the journey required independence. Could she find herself beyond the brown name, beyond the wilderness, beyond the cameras? These questions became a guide for her, leading her toward self-discovery and agency. Choosing to live authentically meant embracing her creativity, sharing her truth, and enjoying quiet moments without fear. It meant finding joy again, not because life had grown easier, but because she chose to see hope in the midst of difficulty. Rain's turning point did not erase her struggles, but it marked the beginning of her transformation. She refused to let rumors define her, to let grief remain her identity. She began stepping forward, not as the baby of the Browns, not as a reality TV character, but as a young woman writing her own story. Perhaps this was what her father would have wanted, to see her rise, not despite the hardships, but because of them. Life beyond the rumors. What happens once the storm passes and whispers fade? For Rain Brown, confronting her struggles publicly was the start of a new chapter. The rumors that once loomed over her had lost their power. By speaking the truth, she reclaimed control over her story. But how does one live fully when the past has already been written by countless voices? Rain chose to rise above the noise. She focused on healing, growth, and passions that mattered to her. Freedom was not in silencing critics, but in refusing to let them control her narrative. Her voice became stronger than the chatter surrounding her. Life beyond the rumors meant rediscovering joy. Simple pleasures, time outdoors, creative pursuits, meaningful connections became anchors for her soul. Fame had once amplified pain, but she learned to find peace beyond the spotlight. Could stepping back be the very key to moving forward with confidence? Her openness also inspired others. Fans who had speculated now admired her courage. By sharing vulnerabilities, Rain transformed personal pain into a testament of resilience. She reminded the world that no one is defined by external judgment. Perhaps this was her greatest victory, turning scrutiny into inspiration. Life beyond the rumors was not perfect, but it was genuine. Rain no longer pretended to be unshaken. She acknowledged that growth is messy, healing ongoing, and strength often quiet. Could this be the most profound lesson? That resilience is not about avoiding struggles, but about rising each time you stumble. With her family still as foundation, Rain was stepping into independence. She was no longer just the youngest Brown sibling or a character on TV. She was a young woman discovering her identity beyond wilderness, cameras, and labels. This was her turning point, a life defined by truth, strength, and hope. Rain Brown's story beyond the rumors became one of survival, courage, and authenticity. Proof that even after whispers fade, resilience remains. What do you think about Rain Brown's journey and how she overcame challenges? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories. And before you leave, check out the video on your screen for another incredible story.